There are good cars, there are great cars, and then there's this car, the Porsche 911 Turbo S. It's like the manifestation of every gearhead's childhood fantasy come to life in a way that even manages to defy dreams. We're talking 600 plus horsepower, sub 3 seconds 0 to 100 km/h times, and way more cruising comfort than should be physically possible given those first two. Forget about electrification, folks. This is the pinnacle of Porsche performance. For more expert car reviews, don't forget to share our channel and subscribe so you can catch some of this and maybe even a little of that. Right, I want to tell you guys what I find so fascinating about this new Turbo S version of the Porsche 911, but I do have to point something else out first, and that's that kind of metallic squeaking you can hear in the back. I don't know if you can, if the mics are picking it up or not, but there is this very incessant squeaking, and it's coming from one of the interior panels in the back, and I've tried for the life of me to sort it out. I didn't notice it earlier this week because I've been cruising around with the windows open or the music on, but now that I'm in here by myself getting ready to run this video, well, all I can hear is this incessant squeaking. So I apologize to you if you can hear it. And the other thing is, not a good look for a car that costs about $263,000 before tax. Anyways, just wanted to point that out so you don't wonder what that noise is if you can hear it. But on the positive side, something I find so fascinating about this Turbo S is that, yeah, it's a modern and precise marvel of engineering, but it also feels very raw and pure as a driver's car. Now, there's all kinds of modern technology in here. You've got variable turbos, active aero, and a ton of electronic gizmos that make this a sub 3 second car to 100 kilometers an hour, which is almost unbelievable. Honestly, there's all kinds of computers in here you can't see that make it feel like this car can predict what you want to do before you even do it. It's like a clairvoyant on wheels. I'm talking about the transmission too. I mean, I'm in normal mode, and as soon as I just tip in with the throttle, it downshifts and spikes the revs like it knows that I want to really give it gas and let you guys see just how quick this thing gets up and goes, but we'll save that for a little later on. But here's the other thing. Just because of all that technology, well, you're not wrapped up in a cocoon of wiring in here. And there's a genuine driving feel to this car. No, there's no more hydraulic steering here, but this electromechanical setup, it feels pretty good, and you get a great sense of what's happening behind the wheel. And then you add everything else, and it is an absolute treat to drive. Now, the 992 version of the Turbo S, which is the one that I'm driving, well, it's a major departure from its predecessor, and there is quite a bit to cover here. Now, as I'm sure you can imagine, this thing is a little bit bigger than the last version, but there's more to the story here, and it starts with this crazy staggered wheel setup that is new for this 2021 Turbo S. The wheels up front, well, they're 20 inches and they come wrapped in 255 section width rubber. But the ones in the back, 21 inches, wrapped in 315 millimeter tires. They're absolutely massive. Obviously, that means there's a wider track, so this thing feels really planted and stable in the corners. And then on top of that, the Turbo S has standard rear wheel steering. So it just handles incredibly well through the sharpest of turns. It's really impressive the way that this thing snakes around. Forget riding on rails. This is like a guided missile that leaves a path of scorched earth in its wake. I can't believe how well this thing handles. And that's always been a trait of the 911, but this Turbo S just elevates it to a whole new level. Honestly, this is one of those rare occasions that you can actually feel the width of the wheels, especially the ones in the back, when you're hustling this thing around. It's really quite the sensation. I don't know the last time I noticed it this much. It's really cool. I dig it a lot. But you know, if you are hustling this thing around, well, you need the right engine too. And all I can say about this is wow. Now, displacement is about the same as it was before. The last Turbo S used a 3.8 liter flat six. And as you can imagine, Porsche stuck to that recipe, though this engine is new and it does displace a little bit less. There's a lot of talk about what the accuracy of the number is. A lot of publications out there will tell you it's a 3.7. It's about 3.745 liters, which I guess would err on the side of 3.7, but Porsche likes to round up. And if you take a look at the badge underneath that grille on the back, well, it says 3.8, but either way, it doesn't matter. It's based on the 3-liter from that Carrera S I drove last year. And I'm telling you right now, you should check that review out too, because it has a 7-speed manual and it is just a fantastic car in its own right. But save that until you're done here and let's stick this one out together. Now, there's all kinds of modern technology in here. The turbochargers, well, they're obviously bigger than before, because if you want to make more output, that's a good place to start with a turbo motor. But they're really cool. They spin in opposite directions on either side of the car, and they're symmetrical instead of sequential. And they also use variable turbo type. What that means is essentially there are vanes and they can open and close depending on how you're driving. And the best way I would look at it is that it's like VTEC but for turbos. It is very cool and you can feel it when you get on the gas. I dig it a lot, and all told, once you add it all up, this thing makes 640 horsepower and 590 pound-feet of torque. That is an awful lot of output. Yeah, you can get cars that make more, but honestly, it's more than enough here. Now, you hit peak torque at right around 2,400 RPM, which might sound late, but because of all that fancy turbo tech, there is no such thing as turbo lag here. As soon as you get on the gas, it is ready to respond, and that counts even if you're in normal mode. If you need a little passing power, just hit this button here on the drive mode selector. It's like overboost. It gives you that maximum output at a moment's notice, and you get it for about 30 seconds. So if you do want to have a little bit of fun but keep it in normal mode, you can do that, or you can shut it off on your own by just hitting the button again. And of course, this drive mode dial gives you a bunch of different settings, so you can have it normal, wet in case it's raining, sport, or sport plus, and then there's an individual mode so you can mix things up as you please. And I'm telling you, this thing is insane. Now, Porsche says this will hit 100 kilometers an hour in 2.7 seconds, which is absolutely ridiculous. That is electric car quick. And if you use launch control, all you got to do is hold down the gas and brake at the same time, and this thing will take off with enough force to make you feel sick. I'm not even joking. This is one of the most violently accelerating cars I have ever driven, but again, it does feel very precise. So it's not like something like a Hellcat where it's kind of uncontrolled power to those rear wheels. This thing does have all-wheel drive as well as an 8-speed dual clutch automatic, because that's the only way that it can put down this kind of output, but it also feels fantastic, and there is a lot of control. I don't know how the engineers over at Porsche pulled this one off, but all I have to say is bravo. Now, I'm sure I don't have to tell you that this is more than just quick in a straight line, and there's all kinds of suspension goodies here too. Porsche's suspension management system, as well as adaptive dampers and electronically controlled anti-roll bars. Very cool stuff. This thing is so much fun to drive on a winding road like this, because it just feels like there is so much bite. It just carves such a tight line. You can feel the width of that track again, especially in the back, but then it's cool the way it snakes its way through corners. I just love driving, and I also just have this thing in normal mode. It's a testament to how well crafted this machine is as a whole. It's just not fair. Honestly, I am so impressed with this car. It is an absolute riot to drive. Now this one I'm driving, well, it does have some extras like a sport suspension that's about 10 millimeters lower than stock, and this fantastic sport exhaust that just sounds so wonderful. But one of the cool things is you can open and close the baffles as you want. So even if I have it in Sport Plus mode here, and I close the baffles, it quiets down quite a bit. But then, I could listen to this thing all day long. It is just amazing to drive. Now, I did mention that fancy aero tech off the top, and here's the thing. You hit this little icon here, and what it'll do is drop that front spoiler and raise the rear one, or you can just let it do its own thing with the different modes and settings. So if you spin it over into Sport Plus, like I have it right now, well, you can see that spoiler in the back is all the way open. It's really cool, but it also works as an air brake, and so does the one in the front, which is something you do need in a car that can get moving this quickly. That air brake is very handy to have. Now, speaking of the brakes, this thing does come standard with some of the biggest carbon ceramics I have ever seen in my life. The ones up front, I think they measure about 420 millimeters across, which makes them almost as big as a 17-inch wheel. And they're grabbed by 10 piston calipers. That is insane. And then the ones in the back, well, they're still 390 millimeters, which isn't exactly modest. That makes them more than 15 inches across. That is pretty nuts. And they have 4 piston calipers of their own, and they can bring this thing down to a stop in a hurry. That's one of those ones you can feel your organs press up against the inside of your rib cage when you really get on the binders. Again, it's just one more way that this thing feels like the ultimate GT car, because it's just as at home out here on the road as it is on the racetrack. Yeah, there's the GT3 and the GT2, there's RS versions. I mean, you can buy track-focused cars, but as far as dual-purpose Porsche 911s, it doesn't get much better than this Turbo S. And if you do plan to take this on a road trip, well, there's about 130 liters of space in that trunk up front, which is about the same as a Mazda MX-5, but you can also fold down these back seats or just get rid of them altogether. They're kind of unnecessary. And then you can load this thing with all kinds of stuff for a road trip or a weekend getaway. I love that, and I don't think there's a car I would rather take on a road trip at this price point than this 911. The 236 grand or so that this thing starts at puts it in line with something like the Aston Martin DB11, and you know, that does have exclusivity in its favor, but that's about it. And I have to say that this is just the better car all around. But here's the thing about this Turbo S. This isn't some kind of mild-mannered supercar, and you do need to respect it. I'm not saying it's an untamed beast, and obviously there are all kinds of things that are here to keep you moving in the right direction. But if you're not paying attention to what you're doing, it's not afraid to step out on you. The ferocity of the performance mixed with that rear engine layout just means it's not gonna hesitate to step out sideways if you get on the gas too early in a corner. And then the other thing is you can get a little bit of that snap oversteer if you're not careful. I'm not trying to scare you off. I'm just telling you, make sure you respect this car and it will treat you well, and you can have all kinds of fun. Now, the ride quality is definitely a little on the firm side, which is probably what's leading to that rattling panel in the back. But honestly, it's not uncomfortable. I don't have a problem with the way it rides, and it is pretty smooth. It's just kind of like a short rebound stroke, so there's not a whole lot of runway to work with. Once you go over a bump, you're best to avoid them. But this is just visceral performance meets pure driving pleasure. I can't get enough. I do think that this car is pretty damn close to perfect. So let me nitpick a couple things inside. I do have to say, I like how simple the space is in here. And this is about as close as you're going to get to minimalist in a modern Porsche. But there are a couple things I'm not so crazy about. I love the fact that there's wireless Apple CarPlay. but there's no wireless phone charger to go with it, which is really weird. And then the USB ports, well, they're in this center console bin, which is cool. And there's also this little slot for your phone, which seems like a good place to put a wireless charger. But anyways, those USB ports are USB-A, not USB-C. But then if you look in a modern Porsche like the Taycan, that has USB-C ports and not USB-A ports. I know those are small nitpicks, but they are things that bug me, and it doesn't matter the price we're talking here. And then something else I'd like to see changed up just a bit. Well, these programmable buttons, there's one here on the center stack as well as one on the steering wheel, and you can run them through a bunch of different settings if you want. But I would like to see some different stuff, like let's say the sport exhaust. Well, you've already got a dedicated button, so why should I be able to program it to that? I'd rather see that programmed to the active aero so I can raise and lower those spoilers if I want by using this toggle here on the center stack instead of that icon on the touchscreen. But again, I'm looking for things to complain about here, and this is such an impressive car. This might be one of the best cars I have ever driven. You know what though? I think it actually is the best car I've ever driven. It's just so impressive from top to bottom. I remember when the 9912 Turbo S came out, thinking to myself, I don't know where Porsche goes from here and how it could get any better, but my powers of prognostication are clearly way off. This is improved in so many ways. I don't know where Porsche goes from here, but I know it doesn't have to be in a hurry because this is such an impressive machine. To recap, I love the performance of the 911 Turbo S, how genuine and engaging it is to drive, and how it's such a total transformation from just about any other version of this car. I don't like the lack of a wireless phone charger or USB-C ports, but come on, there's almost nothing to complain about here. Money can't buy you happiness, but it can buy you a 992 version of the Porsche 911 Turbo S, and that's basically the same thing. Okay, not quite, but I will say this, if you've got this kind of dough burning a hole in your pocket, I really don't think there's a better way to spend it on four wheels.